everybody. Good afternoon, good evening, and good night, whatever it may be at your time in the world. It is Recotopia, episode 76. I'm Jeremy Scott.
And I'm Aaron Dicer.
Hey, everybody in the chat. Thanks for coming out again. I even saw two people pop into the chat just to say I won't be able to join this week, and I love that community is so tight. And we love your input to the show and live reactions. This week's big recommend is Double Indemnity. But before we get into that goodness, Aaron, do you have any small recommends this week?
Oh boy, do I ever. Let's start with television. I have a really good friend who sometimes turns me on to great pop culture. His name's Jeremy, and one day he said, "Hey, Aaron, have you ever seen this Naked and Afraid show? I'm addicted to it." And I said, "Nope, haven't watched the Naked and Afraid show, but I'll give it a chance." And he was right. Very entertaining stuff. Naked people trying to survive, and really, really enjoyed it. Enjoyed it so much, in fact, that I went on a Naked and Afraid journey and saw every single episode that the show has put out, which is a lot of episodes.
It sure is.
I am now on my journey through the side shows, the spin-off shows. There's been one recently, Naked and Afraid Alone, I think came out. There's, of course, the Naked and Afraid XL, which is like, some of the legends and the people who've done really well going on a longer, journey with no clothing and survival. The latest one to come out is Naked and Afraid Last One Standing. Now, this one aired over the last couple months on Discovery and is just now hitting Max. I think it hit Max last week, and so that's where I've been watching it. And this brings back like the legends of the legends. If you've watched any Naked and Afraid or Naked and Afraid XL, you know a lot of these people. You know Jeff, you know Matt, you know Steven. Like those are like the three big names in Naked and Afraid, and then all these others. Gary is another big one. This one is different. It kind of wants to be Naked and Afraid Survivor, except for all the contestants but one decided not to play Survivor. They just decided to play Naked and Afraid. Jeff was the only one out there who was like, maybe if I get these tools and don't let these people have them. And he gets completely ostracized by everybody on the show for being a jerk and selfish and whatever. And he's like, "I'm just playing the game that's put in front of me." And everybody's like, "You don't have to. We're sharing everything."
That's wild.
It is wild, and I really, really enjoyed it. I love games like this that have that social dynamic, and this even more than the other Naked and Afraids, which all have some sort of social dynamic, has a lot of that. And it really speaks to our inability to see past our own narrative. And this goes for both Jeff and kind of this like Mean Girls type group that forms around hating him. Like, there's neither one of them are able to see how they're kind of all being jerks to each other in one way or another. And I just love thinking about that kind of stuff. And when it's naked people trying to survive in Africa, all the better. So
I will, just to defend myself a little bit, I believe when I told you about this show, I focused on the social aspect.
Yes, you did, because you know me. Yeah,
not the naked aspect.
Did I make it sound like it was the nudity that you were interested in?
No, you didn't.
Okay,
I wanted to clarify to the listeners just in case, because even back when it was just a man and a woman trying to survive for 21 days, there was always fascinating social stuff that came out of every episode. And I'm always interested in the hunting and whatnot, but I was much more interested in how they got along. Did they get along? Why not? There was always somebody seemed like that wouldn't cuddle for body warmth because they were too prudish about their marriage or something.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, why are you on this show if you aren't going to do one of the basic, obvious things to survive?
Yeah.
But I have not seen The Last One Standing. You've now seen probably way more Naked and Afraid than I have. But I do know that on Sundays, they tend to run marathons throughout the afternoon, and I sometimes find myself there while I'm
they
working.
might be running it. Like I said, I know it's on Max. All 10 episodes are on Max now. Yeah, it's not about the look. There are many places I could go see butts. Like it's just like it's like that's not what it's about. It's just kind of the hook, for the show, and it a survival element to it as well. Like you don't have any of your comforts, including your clothing. So yeah,
man, the caveman didn't have blue jeans. Why should you? My first.
Also, I will say about the nudity, since we brought it up. There are very few places in our culture where naturalistic nudity of all types of bodies is a norm. Usually nudity is reserved for quote unquote, culturally sexy people or, whatever.
Yeah.
This is one of those places. And I think that's a net positive. I really do. I think we need to see more normal bodies. All of us do. So, yeah. Anyhow.
Yeah, indeed. I think the first time my wife found out I was watching a show called Naked and Afraid, she came in and looked at the TV and was like, okay, I'm not worried about that. My first small recommend this week is a film that I saw last week from 2022 called Devotion. Now, I will give you the caveat that Jonathan Majors is the star of this film and is currently embroiled in some legal PR murk. And I don't know how that's going to work out. And if you have already chosen to start avoiding him and his work, I respect that decision. But until I feel like I have more information, I'm still going to consume what work of his I see in front of me. That's
before we even get to the conversation about what different levels we all have of comfortability with parts of something being from somebody who we disagree with or who has done bad things.
Yeah.
It's a tough conversation. There are hundreds, thousands of people that work on these movies, and which one of them does it matter, and how much does it matter? So yeah, all those conversations.
So I just think it's funny that Glenn Powell was in two
it is
high profile military plane movies in the same year, but he has a lot more to work with here as an actor. Have you seen this?
I have. Yeah.
Okay. This movie is it's based on a true story. It's set during the Korean War. And it's about a friendship between the only black pilot in the squadron and a white pilot in the squadron who has recently transferred in. And this person that Jonathan Majors is playing Jesse Brown. He faced a lot of open racism in his military career, and that is one of the main focuses of the movie, and the fact that their friendship overcomes what is at that point in time basically indoctrinated racism in the military. There's even the black people on the aircraft carrier are almost exclusively privates and cooks and whatnot, and there's even a scene where they're like, we're proud of you, every time you take off, we're rooting for you, you inspire us. The action in the air I thought was surprisingly good, and there's a couple of hilarious coincidences, I think, to the plot from Top Gun Maverick, just because Glenn Powell being in both of them, I can't help but think about it. But I thought this was extremely well acted and pretty moving. I think it's an 80-something on Rotten Tomatoes, 81. So it looks like I'm not alone. Paramount Plus and Showtime is where you can watch Devotion right now if you want, and that is my first small recommend.
I think you put it perfectly. Incredible performances and moving material, and that's what makes the movie well. Overall execution is kind of tropey and cliched at times. Like,
sure.
It goes to the same places a lot of these kinds of movies go. However, I do think the performances notch it up quite a bit. I think both Glenn and Jonathan Majors give incredible performances in the movie. So yeah.
What's your second small recommend, Aaron?
My second small recommend is in the area of movies. It's a little movie called Barbenheimer.
Oh my! Are we doing a twofer?
Well, you have to when you talk about Barbie and Oppenheimer, I think.
Okay.
Because the whole cultural conversation, I thought I'd just hit on the both. And honestly, they're a lot more similar than you would think. And I have very similar things to say, which is it's so good to see our top-notch directors just make top-notch material. Nolan and Gerwig are both really, really impressing me. I think they're both geniuses in their own way. I love how Barbie is this almost deep philosophical treatise on gender and sexuality and feminism and all these things, and is at the same time just a drop dead hilarious comedy. Everybody in this movie is so good, so funny. Gosling, I think, gets the lion's share of the laughs. He's so hilarious in this, which if you've seen The Nice Guys, you know Gosling can be super funny. So yeah, Barbie's great. And then Oppenheimer is just something I haven't quit thinking about, you know, how Nolan uses these ideas of fission and fusion and how the chain reactions in our lives go from, you know, small to big or big to small. And it's really smart, which you'd expect from Nolan. I really enjoyed both of these movies. I'm on a tear right now with Asteroid City, Dead Reckoning, Barbie, and Oppenheimer. It is a good time to be a movie fan, aside from the fact that there will be no movies in a couple months.
I had an interesting conversation with my friend Patrick yesterday about Dead Reckoning and whether or not the part one in the title is partly to blame for its lackluster performance at the box office. I thought that movie was absolutely going to dominate after what Top Gun Maverick did.
A lot of people did.
And I also threw out, is it possible maybe we've reached a Tom Cruise fatigue? Like,
I don't know. It could be. It's always hard to know. There are a million different little things that can impact. Like, do you think Barbie makes, by the way, $163 million domestic its opening weekend? Biggest movie of the year, beats out Mario Brothers for the biggest opening of the year. Do you think it makes that money without the Barbenheimer phenomenon? Do you think there's an element of culture that just grabs onto something and you have to see it or else you're out of the conversation?
I think that was entirely fabricated by stealth PR. I'm not even a little bit joking. There were multiple stories about the Barbie movie that did not make sense to me. They used up all the pink paint in the world was an article that went viral. Ryan Gosling says he was born to play Ken, and if you don't agree, then you don't know Ken. That felt like a really stupid thing to go viral and manufactured. And then they started with the Barbenheimer, and I am absolutely convinced that was started by the studios to boost, and I think it worked so well they're going to do it again and again and again.
I think it was probably a combination of the natural instinct of two big movies that seem so different in tone coming out at the same time, and people commenting on that, and then studios going, what if we stoke this fire in all the ways?
See, I am too cynical. I don't think the public started any of that. I think we're played by top 40 music. I mean, I think we're played by everything. So I'm too cynical, but you may be right. I don't really know. I just feel like there have been, this is just counter programming. This has happened for the last 50 years of film distribution. I used to see it every single weekend because every single weekend multiple films would come out, especially in the summer.
This used to be the norm.
Right, a romantic comedy almost always counter programs against a big action film. That's just what you do.
Sometimes there'd be two action films that would come out the same weekend.
But that is considered more dangerous from a booking standpoint. You want to avoid, like Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning really picked a bad date because they got steamrolled, and I don't think they're ever going to come back because people are going to Barbenheimer over and over again just to say they did.
Yeah, they'll
and
try.
Then the studios started sending their stars and directors to take pictures with tickets in front of both movies, and that only fueled from there. I want to do what Tom Cruise and Greta Gerwig did. So to me, I'm just thankful that it sounds like both movies are really good because I would have been really disappointed if we all got played and the movies were just kind of disappointing.
Yeah, It reminds me a lot of the Gentle Minions thing. It's just that something happens in youth culture or whatever, and it just becomes something that the studios lean into. But yeah. I think Warner was pretty ticked actually when Barbie landed on their day, if I remember correctly. But I think they're doing it about face now.
I don't think it took very long for somebody
No.
to convince them, hey, we can
No.
use this to our advantage.
Yeah.
And look, even the graphic you're using on screen was fan created, and that
yes.
people have run with that. People have created shirts and worn the shirt of that art to see both movies.
Yep.
But I still think the seed was planted from a marketing standpoint. And, anyway, that's a conversation for a completely different type of podcast. My second small recommend is another film. So I promise one of these days, kids, I'm going to get back to food and drink. But I've seen this movie before, but I saw again last week, A Simple Favor from 2018 with Anna Kendrick and Blake Lively, basically, and Henry Golden. And I didn't see this movie when it came out, and Chris had to push me because I just didn't see anything that interested me. And he was like, this is the most Jeremy movie I've seen in a long time. And I said, okay, I'll watch it. And I watched it, and he was right because he knows me well. And it is the right balance of mystery and humor. Anna Kendrick meets Blake Lively. They both have kids in the same class. And they bond rapidly, and then Blake Lively shows up dead in a lake. And Anna Kendrick starts bonding with Blake Lively's widowed husband. I don't want to say anymore. But it takes twists and turns. It's a fun little modern noir. For a half second, I thought about making this my double feature for Double Indemnity. I think that would have worked fairly well, but it is not. And you can watch A Simple Favor on MGM Plus or Amazon Prime Video if you would like to check it out. If you haven't yet, it's just a nice, breezy, fun, murdery mystery kind of deal. So there you go.
It handles its competing tones really, really well.
It does.
And there is some stuff that feels out of place in the movie, in my opinion. There's some really over the top comedy stuff that I think Paul Feig couldn't help himself with. It feels like it goes a little bit too far, but like all of the relationship stuff and the plot stuff and the mystery stuff works really, really well. And these performances are great.
It's easily my favorite Paul Feig movie. Easily.
Oh yeah, yeah, yep.
All right, it's time, everybody, for this week's big recommend. Aaron, this is your offering to the group. Why don't you take us away?
Double Indemnity is 1944. It is a Billy Wilder film. I am a recent convert to the Billy Wilder Church of Amazingness. Kind of the Sorkin of his time, maybe. Just an incredible writer that really uses the English language as a way to create energy, and this movie is a great example of that. It is one of his early films. It is the definition of film noir, and through its conceit, which is this, Fred MacMurray plays an insurance salesman who, through his journeys, meets up with this woman who wants to know about accident insurance because maybe she wants to get rid of her husband. They have an immediate striking chemistry, and despite him knowing that he is holding on to a hot poker, as the movie says, he cannot let go. It is the power of boners of the movie in many ways, because she has him under her spell. He works with a boss who has the little man inside, so he's like the best at gauging when something's off, because when you're in the insurance business, you got to be ready for people to try to pull one over on you. There's an early scene where somebody comes in and is trying to pull one over on him, and he completely gets them. This is Edward G. Robinson, by the way, playing this boss character. Yeah. And maybe the best performance in the movie. He's so good in this movie.
And I already didn't want to do it because it was the third biggest role, but then he realized this is a new era of my career and I can do good work in this role, and I think he nearly steals the movie. Yeah.
So Fred MacMurray tells her no when it gets a little bit more blatant, like, can we kill my husband kind of thing. He says no. He goes back home. She then comes over and he says, I knew this was happening, and they end up hatching a plan and kind of falling for each other. Or are they falling for each other? Or are they just spiders with webs? The movie will get into showing us a little bit more. So they go through this scam, and it's one of those movies which is really interesting to me because it doesn't play the pieces as mysteries. It plays them as a progressive plot. So they are telling you what they're doing as they're doing it. And the fact that this movie can do that and still remain interesting, I think, is a big plus in the movie's favor, because it's not necessarily trying to hold information from you. It's just revealing things as they go along. So the plot involves getting a signature so that he signs to have this accident insurance without knowing he has this accident insurance. It involves this intricate double indemnity plan where the payout can be twice as much if it happens on a train. So they have this big train plan where they actually kill him on the way to the train. He becomes the double in the train and then falls off, quote unquote, the back of the train. There are witnesses to him being on there, and then they replace the body near where he would have fallen off. And then in a beautiful scene, they get back in the car and the car won't start. One of the best examples of the car won't start cliche that I've ever seen.
Yep. Because you're waiting. I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, go for it.
Waiting all movie for the thing that's going to go wrong.
Yes.
And when you think it's that, like, they're screwed. They are so screwed.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they end up screwed anyway, but if that car doesn't start, they are screwed. And I love that the movie just flips that on its ear. And yeah, maybe the first instance of the car not starting in film.
Yeah. It really is kind of a perfect murder movie. It's a very Hitchcockian feel in that way. Hitchcock loved to think about the perfect murder, and that is definitely what he's doing here, going through all the details. And yet, after everything goes perfectly, he has this little part where he just can't shake the feeling that it's still going to go wrong somehow. They're past all the hard stuff, and he just can't shake that feeling. The head guy at the insurance tries to push suicide and is completely owned by Keys in that scene when he goes through all the suicide actuarials and lays all that out. That doesn't make any sense. But then Keys gets stuck on the broken leg. And then there's this whole section. They have a daughter of the husband that was killed who's going through this thing with a boyfriend. And she starts to tell Fred McMurray's character that maybe her mom's a psychopath, or not her mom, but her stepmom is a psychopath and actually killed her actual mom by poisoning her. Like, there was a smile on her face. She tells him that she knew that she was trying on a black veil before her dad had his accident, as if practicing her mourning. So it becomes clear that she knows a little bit more. So then they both plan to tie up their loose ends, which means to get rid of each other and blame it on this other guy. She gets a shot off against him, hits him, wounds him, and he then comes up to her, and she cannot take the second shot, but he very coldly shoots her twice and kills her. And then the film, by the way, takes place bookended already at the end of the film. Another possible trope or cliche now, the "I bet you're wondering how I got here" cliche, the in medias res. But it's a great example of this, not just because we are wondering what happened, but also it sets up the narration. It's a beautiful thing where the film noir, which is known for this, narrating, and then the dame walked in and whatever. Yeah. You actually know he's sitting wounded in his office talking into a dictaphone to record all this for his boss. And then we find out his boss has been listening to him record the last part for a while. And then he thinks he's going to get away, but he can't even get to the elevators. And one of the most beautiful endings in movies, where he says to the boss, "You know why you couldn't figure out it was me? It was because I was too close. I was right across the desk from you." And his boss says, "It was even closer than that." And he says, "I love you too." And I love the end of this movie. I love so much of this movie. We're not shown if he dies or not.
He's dead.
I think he's dead. Yeah, I think it doesn't matter what happens after that, whether the police show up before he dies or not. I think he dies. But there you go. That is Double Indemnity. Jeremy, I'm very excited to hear what you thought.
Loved it. I loved it. You stole one of my best notes about how genius it was to use the dictaphone as the device to get that noir narration into the film without him actually narrating. I thought that was brilliant. I loved the movie. I thought Fred MacMurray was, like you said, better than I would have expected, given what I know him from. Edward G. Robinson was incredible, especially that suicide stat rant. But earlier, there's a scene where the guy burned up his own business van and is trying to get the insurance, but he has already investigated and found the kindling under the van and knows this guy burned his own truck or whatever and sends him out. And the guy stops at the door and Keith says, "You forget how to open a door? Put your hand on the knob, turn it to the left. Now pull it towards you." I just thought that whole scene was awesome. I love McMurray's facial expressions. I think he does more work in scenes where he's not speaking than he does in scenes where he is speaking, especially after the murder, as he's involved in conversations. Like Keith comes to him saying, okay, he broke his leg and had accident insurance. Why wouldn't he? It's $100,000 or $50,000. Why wouldn't he come get that? And McMurray plays it extremely well, as it's a slow burn until he finally gets to that point where he's like, no, we're done. We're out. We have to stop. We can't sue them. We have to run. We have to get out of here. And at that point, he still doesn't know she's playing him. So he's both, I wrote, Walter's not a good guy. He's also very stupid. Because if you're not vexed by her from the first moment you see her on the balcony and you see that anklet on her, that anklet is what just tantalizes him. If that doesn't happen, he sees through her every step of the way. But because he's mesmerized, because he's fallen, I don't know how she knows, except she's probably got experience doing this, manipulating people, manipulating men. I also figured from the outset that she was the one that was going to shoot him. I was not surprised when I saw her put the gun under the cushion. I was surprised that she simply didn't fire again and he shot her. That surprised me a lot. And then he goes out and tells the bad, possibly abusive boyfriend, "Get out of here, go back to Lola." And I guess ultimately he's doing that for Lola's sake, even though I think that boyfriend is not a good person. But yeah, I was surprised how much I liked it. I was surprised how many times he said the word baby. But some of the notes I wrote, in the opening scene when he comes into his office and starts the dictaphone, he lights a cigarette and then he sets it on the edge of the desk right in front of him with the burning end hanging off. I'm a former smoker. I've done that. But he's got an ashtray 5 inches away from there with rests for a cigarette. And I had to pause the movie and go, what is he doing? That doesn't make any sense. Like, it'll burn. It's going to, this is how you start fires. It's not using an ashtray when you have one. I love the bit about the super fancy Spanish mansion. Probably cost him $30,000 if he ever paid it off. I died laughing. Just at inflation in general.
It's wild. Well, and the 50,000 and 100,000 that they're dealing with too would be like 1 million, 2 million today.
If not more. If not more. It's just the inflation was hilarious. I don't like this thing they do in the 40s where a man squeezes a woman's shoulders and lifts her up to kiss him. I think that's a product of the era. But it rubs me the wrong way. He does it several times in this movie.
There's a definite male aggression to sexuality that is prominent in culture. I think even today, like I think it's it's kind of part of that whole thing.
Yeah,
like, the forceful
she even says at one point, "You're hurting me." Like he squeezes again, and I was like, "Oh, no, stop squeezing." He's really dismissive of her early on. Like when she comes to his apartment, he makes a drink and hands it to her and says, "Here, see if you can carry that as far as the living room." Basically insulting her.
Mhm.
And I wrote that I love the car fake out. And then he says near the end, what I didn't know was that she had plans of her own, and I wrote in all caps, "You didn't know that?" But yeah, no, I really enjoyed this ride. And yeah, it is probably deserving of being on those lists of best movies ever. And makes me really want to dive more into the Church of Billy Wilder awesomeness.
You should, man. I am, like I said, a recent convert. I've watched a bunch of it. Have you seen like The Apartment? Have you watched The Apartment?
I have not.
Dude, I'm telling you, there's some amazing Billy Wilder stuff. It really is interesting to me how it feels like a Sorkin thing, where you watch his movies and you're just like, oh, real humans probably don't talk like that, but it's so fun to watch people talk like that.
Yeah.
I'll go over some of my favorite lines. The sexual tension right from the beginning when she's in the towel. And he's like, anything I can do, and he says, "I'd hate for you to have an incident where you're not fully covered."
Yeah.
And it's just like all that stuff is layered in there. Let's see, what was another one? Oh, was just fixing some iced tea. You want some? Unless you've got a bottle of beer that's not working, which I think is so great. Just the fixing an iced, I don't know. I love that kind of stuff.
He's really derisive of her iced tea too, man. It must taste nasty.
Yeah. What are you, British? And he's not a good guy. I don't know if we've made that clear. Like, I don't think anybody's a good guy in this movie. And it's worth talking about because we get into this conversation sometimes about, oh, we need somebody who, is a hero that we feel good about in a movie. And it's just not always the case. You need to be compelled by something. Now, that could be somebody you're rooting for. You could have a rooting interest in a character because you like them. And, movies do use that. But they also use other things to compel audiences. And I think the boss is our good guy in this movie. If there is one, I think he's the one, we're probably supposed to root for, but he doesn't have like a motivating factor. Like, he's not our protagonist. No. Our protagonist is a jerk and a womanizer and a murderer. So yeah. Then there's that whole thing where she's like, the speed limit's 45 and he's like, "Would you clock me at, officer?" He says, 90. And then there's a part about how about at the end she's like, "How about you cry on my husband's shoulder?" And he's like, "Well, that tears it," and he leaves. I just thought all that stuff was so good. I love the way he lights matches with his thumb.
It does it all movie long.
Yeah,
I feel like that is impossible. Like, I couldn't get my head around the science of that. Like,
it must have been a different kind of match. Like, it must have been a friction match that had a real.
Had to have been. I've seen men. I don't know why I'm getting sexist. I've seen people take a paper matchbook and use one hand and light a match that way, but I've never seen a single match use your finger or thumb. It's a pretty cool trick.
Yeah. At the end of that encounter, he says, or she says, "I wonder if I know what you mean," and he says, "I wonder if you wonder."
Yeah.
Just a beautiful retort there. There's a line later on that the boss says where a guy's like, "One of my favorite osteopaths is in town." The boss says, "Osteopath? Don't put her on the expense report." It's hilarious. Then there are these movie making moments that I want to make sure I mention. Right at the beginning, you mentioned the anklet. It's this real key piece of what's going on. Now, there is, I read, an urban legend or a rumor that an anklet at times was a way for a woman to indicate her availability even if she was married. Like that was something that a woman would use to say that. That's an urban legend I read about. Could be true, maybe not, whatever. But what I do know is in that scene, she's sitting with her foot up that has the anklet on it, right? He spots it, says something about it. She puts her foot down to hide it. And then gets up and walks around. He says a little more about accident insurance, and she has an idea. She's walking by the fireplace. She has an idea. As soon as she has that idea, she goes back, sits down, and puts that same foot over where the ankle is right in front of his face again. Like, it's a very clear indication she has shifted. She has now made a choice. I found my mark. I found who I can use. Now I'm going to seduce them. And it's just a really subtle thing that I actually hadn't picked up on until this time through the film. The way the camera stays on her during the murder, she honks the horn and it just stays with her while he's, killing
You hear it, but
her
don't see
husband,
it.
and you hear it, but don't see it, I thought was really, really cool. And then when he enters the room in the final kind of confrontation, his shadow enters the room first, which I just thought was really cool visually and also metaphorically. And then she also, again, has her leg up with the same, anklet on and presenting in the same way. So just like
Just
a
doesn't
lot
work
of,
that time.
yes, exactly. Just a lot of cool stuff like that I really, really like. In
Yeah,
this movie.
I struggled for a while to try and make a connection between the title Double Indemnity and then him doubling the dead man as a way to be protected against being caught. I don't know if that's intended or if I'm just making that up. Because I have seen plenty of people on Twitter make stuff up about movies and have the director go, well, no, that's not what I meant at all. So who knows? But once I knew he was doubling him, I was like, maybe that's why the title has double. My wife is not a fan of the title of this movie, but it's okay. But I did love it. Any more observations, or do we need to move into the super secret double feature?
I like at the end when she's trying to woo him in again, and he just says, "That's cute. Tell it again."
Yeah, he's so over it.
I love the lines in this movie. I'm sorry, I could just go on about them. No, go ahead. Let's talk about super secret double feature.
All right, so I did see one person in the chat say one of the ones I'm not going to use. But while I was watching this movie, the movie I kept thinking of most, and I'm not using this as my double feature, was Basic Instinct. Just because, Basic Instinct is a clear noir thriller. There is a huge element of sex being a driving factor in confusing our protagonist and his motivations. But I felt like that was a little on the nose, just like I felt like Dial M for Murder or Strangers on a Train were a little on the nose. And you know how I like to not be on the nose. I like to be somewhere on the cheek or maybe on the forehead.
Especially in this movie where it's about not seeing the nose in front of your face. Yeah.
And so what I'm going to go with for my super secret double feature is Gus Van Sant's To Die For, with Nicole Kidman and a breakout Joaquin Phoenix performance. I believe this was 1995. And she plays an ambitious wannabe reporter, works her way up to Weather Girl, and does a segment at the local high school and recruits 2 students, including Joaquin Phoenix, to be part of a segment. Her husband doesn't want her to pursue this anymore, and she very quickly decides to kill him and sleeps with Joaquin Phoenix and convinces him to kill her husband for her. And in the end, no one really gets out of it okay. Both the husband dies, she dies, and Joaquin Phoenix goes to prison forever. And so I just felt like there were way too many parallels in the story and the themes. Now, tonally, it's a little different. It's a little more comic thriller, and I think it handles the balance pretty well. Yeah, in terms of the themes and using sex to get somebody to help me kill my husband because I want this ambition, make promises about we'll be together afterwards, just too much in common, and that is a little bit more obscure movie than Basic Instinct. So that's my
To
super
Die
secret
For,
double
right?
feature. I'm sorry?
What did you say? To Die For?
To Die For.
Yeah.
It was...
I haven't seen that one in a while, but I remember thinking it was good.
1995, I was correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's 65 on Rotten Tomatoes, so I haven't seen it in a while either. But yeah, that's my double feature.
Just one more thing I wanted to mention. The terrible wig that Barbara Stanwyck is wearing in this movie is so bad that it's like part of the legend of this movie. And Billy Wilder would talk about, that they almost tried to pretend that it was intentional.
I believe what I read was that he at first claimed it was intentional and eventually just came clean.
It's so bad.
Yeah, it's distracting, but
it is. I also love that one scene where he tries to get him to take over his job. The boss tries to take him, and he's like, "How do you feel about a $50 cut in pay?" And his response is, "No, I don't want that." And the guy's like, his response to that is, "But you'll have to work so much harder." Like that's a plus somehow. It's like you get to work harder and make less money. Why are you not for this? And he's selling it so well. I don't know.
He's a good salesman, even though he's not the salesman.
That is correct.
All right. So your homework for next week, everybody, chosen by me. I felt I went so heavy last week with Fallout, I wanted to go light. So I'm going with 2009's Adventureland. This stars Jesse Eisenberg and Kristen Stewart and Ryan Reynolds. Kristen Wiig, Bill Hader, and Martin Starr are all in this film. It is a pretty straightforward coming of age, going from teenagehood to adulthood, love, sex, drugs, skipping school, that kind of stuff. I don't actually think he skips school. This takes place in the summer. But I've seen this several times, and it is a warm place for me to go. I just connect to so many of these characters. And you can watch this for free in two places, on YouTube and on Pluto TV. And then it is available for rent on almost all the major streaming services. So again, it is Adventureland. And I'm looking forward to seeing that again. It's been about 5 or 6 years for me. You ever seen it?
I have, but it has been a while.
Yeah.
So I'm looking for. I think it's been long enough that my movie taste has evolved. So I'm interested in watching it with new eyes, for sure.
That's a very nice way of saying you don't remember liking it.
I don't remember liking it, but I don't remember hating it either. I remember watching it and go, oh, that was funny.
It's okay. This show, it's okay if this show, one of its hosts doesn't end up liking a movie. We're not gonna bat 1,000 for forever.
It's true.
Just mathematically not possible. All right, let's dive into some questions, and then we'll let everybody get off to lunch. What sports event would you like to see made into a feature film?
I was thinking about this, and I don't know if this qualifies as a sports event, but I really think there has to be a way. Like, the ending of this movie would be so good, there has to be a way to make it. Do you remember Jason McElwain? Does that name ring a bell to you?
Jason who?
McElwain. Jason McElwain was a functioning autistic kid who played on a basketball team. This probably was a couple decades ago, maybe 15 years ago, something like that.
All right.
And he played on the team, always sat the bench, but he was on the team all year long. At the very last, I think it's last game of the season, it's a very Rudy kind of story, which got me thinking about sports movies and that kind of thing. Coach puts him in, and the real life story is he airballs a three-pointer, misses another shot, and then hits 6 3-pointers in a row, scores 20 points in the final several minutes of this game, and the place just goes nuts, carries him off the court. Like, just one of those real feel-good stories, and I just don't feel like if you haven't seen this video, either ever or recently, highly recommend go checking out him hitting all those threes and just how the place just explodes every time, and just this kid who never got in, just becoming a sports hero. So it's like Rudy if Rudy ran for 5 touchdowns. You know what I mean? Like,
wow.
It's
well,
amazing stuff.
This is not my answer, but you just made me think of Jim Abbott, that pitcher from the 90s.
Yeah.
I don't know how to say this correctly. He did not have full use of his right arm, but he came up with a very unique way of holding his glove there and pitching, and then eventually pitched a no-hitter. But there's already been a movie about a no-hitter, and it wasn't very entertaining to me with Kevin Costner.
I like that movie, but it's probably because it's the Tigers.
Yeah, that's what I figured. But I think for my answer today, I'm going to go with something relatively recent. I actually have 2 answers. There's a golfer on the female tour named Rose Zhang. She's still in college, I think, technically. She won the last 2 college championships individual, turned pro this year, and won the very first tournament she played in, which is unheard of. Tiger Woods came in like 90th in his first golf tournament ever. Now, I think he won the 6th tournament he played in. But for her to win the very first tournament she ever played in is something that I don't think the world has ever seen, and I've been kind of interested in her story. The other thing I thought of was to do some kind of an Aaron Brockovich style film about how they finally got Florida to ban dog racing, which, in my opinion, my aunt and uncle adopted a couple of former racing greyhounds, and they learned a lot about that particular industry and how terrible it is, especially to the dogs. So they can't do that anymore in Florida. They banned it, and they need to do that with horse racing too. But I think that could be interesting too. But we'll see. Now, let's see. Aaron is right. For the love of the game is great. You're wrong, Patrick. The 2004
It's
Red
two
Sox.
versus one. That means we're right, Jeremy. Don't you know how math works?
The 2004 Red Sox has already been made into a movie with Jimmy Fallon and Drew Barrymore.
Accidentally, right? That wasn't
Yes.
originally.
Yes, it
It's
was a
amazing.
complete accident. But seeing them run around on the field after they won was really that was really awkward. I did not like that. To esports count? Interesting. They should, because I would love to see a docudrama about Shanghai Dragons in Overwatch League. Now, I understand all of those words individually, but together in that sentence, I do not understand that. The Cubs World Series, yeah, that would be really good. Just don't.
That was wild, man. All the things that happened in that Cubs series.
Oh, my
the
goodness.
back and forth. Yeah.
Yeah, just tell that story without having to mention Bartman anywhere in it, please.
Yeah.
I think you can say he was missing his left hand. Okay, thank you, Dave. I just didn't want to step on any landmines there. I'd love an Adam McKay style movie about Ryan Reynolds and Rob McElhenney's purchase of Wrexham. Well, we're kind of getting a documentary series about that.
I love that docuseries. Yeah, the first season's great.
I'm sure it's amazing, but that's the reason they bought that club.
I don't doubt it.
Okay. Glenn Burke was openly gay and got railroaded out of the league because of it. I'm pretty sure he also invented the high five. That's a good one. The Bartman game. Thank you, Patrick. You've been very helpful today weighing in. I appreciate your presence. Let's go on to another question. After the success of West Side Story remake, what is another musical you would like to see them try to do a less problematic remake of? How many problematic musicals do we have to choose from here?
You know what's interesting is I totally missed the musical part of this question.
Awesome.
But I still did list a musical in one of my 3 possible answers, and that would be Grease.
Oh yeah, good call.
Grease is so like the energy of it, the song of it, the era of it is all fun and exciting. It is just super problematic with the way it deals with teenage sexuality and especially the gender roles involved in that. The whole point of the musical seems to be to change who you are to get the man you want. So yeah, it's icky in a lot of ways. But yeah, I do like the energy of it. So that would be my answer.
Yeah, Guys and Dolls has kind of got some of that like problematic energy between men and women and how they view them.
Sure.
But I ended up going with the easy one, Holiday Inn, which is a Bing Crosby
Yes.
Fred Astaire movie where they actually have a performance in blackface. That's not the only musical that does that.
Nope.
But that was the one that I chose. Yeah, somebody in the chat wanted to go with Grease. Little Shop of Horrors, not that it's problematic. All the jerks get their comeuppance, but I wanted to bring it up because it's awesome. Yeah, it is. Is Jaws 2 a musical? No, I don't believe so. Not from
Well, I mentioned Ace Ventura, I think, is the biggest example of this to me. The transphobia in Ace Ventura is so bad and so terrible. And I just think it's a really funny movie. Otherwise, I wish there existed a version that just wasn't so terrible. It's just terrible.
I was talking with Jonathan a year or two ago when I was watching Soap Dish.
Yeah.
It's a great movie that just at the end goes really transphobic. And it mars the whole thing.
Yep.
All right. Creedence Clearwater Revival's Vietnam song has been used so much in movies that as soon as I hear that guitar, I picture Hollywood actors in a helicopter. What are your predictions for songs that future generations will say, ugh, in a montage of 2020's cliche? Ding.
I have no idea. This question is so outside of my wheelhouse. I just don't interact with music in that way. I'm going to go for my choice, the down-tempo, very contemplative version of Baby Shark will be the future version of Why Are We Doing This So Much? So,
like that trailer for this. Oh, you don't watch trailers. The trailer for The Social Network had Creep.
it's a very common thing. Every movie is doing it now. There was a great parody for Avatar: The Way of Water. Somebody set the Avatar: Way of Water trailer to like a dramatic down-tempo version of Eiffel 65's Blue. It was. I thought it was great.
The reason they do that, it's not just a trend. I think we've talked about this before, but is that if they use a cover song in a trailer or in a film, it's cheaper for them than if they use the original song. So they get somebody to cover it,
Right.
and then slow it down, add a child's choir, what have you. Yeah. So I mean, look, something I didn't prep in the answers is Mr. Brightside by the Killers, because that has the distinction. It has a very weird distinction of being basically the most charting song in the UK. I think it charted for maybe 15 or 20 years, just an absurd length of time. It may still be charting. So that suggests it may end up getting used in media a lot. But the one I wrote down was Circles by Post Malone, just because I hear that everywhere I go, and it's a nice catchy boop, 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 boop. And I think I could see that working its way into transitions in television shows, and it's a good mood song. But I thought that was an interesting question, even though not really an easy one to answer.
No.
Somebody says something like Blurred Lines. Yeah, or I Love It. Yeah, I think that may be a good answer. 21 Pilots. Yes. Oh man,
that seems likely. Yeah,
that's
already kind of the case. There's a lot of 21 Pilot stuff that ends up in stuff.
Are they the biggest, fastest rising U.S. rock band? I think they have to be.
I don't know.
Anyway, The Weeknd, Blinding Light. Good answer there. All right, let's do one more and then go to lunch. Will you go to lunch? Well, who's a director you would like to talk to about a topic completely unrelated to film, and what is that topic?
This was not a difficult one for me. I want to hang out with Damien Chazelle, and I want to talk about his fascination and his focus on is excellence / immortality worth it. Every single movie he's done plays with this theme of the idea of, is doing something excellent worth the destruction and pain to get there? From, Whiplash to First Man, to Babylon most recently. Even La La Land is about this. Like the idea of pursuing your career and the destruction it leaves on a relationship, or, whatever it might be. He just seems really interested in this idea of excellence and its value, and is the darkness under greatness worth the greatness? And I would love to have that conversation with him, because it just seems like such a theme for him in all of his movies.
I can have that conversation with me. No, it's not. It's funny that I see so many people mentioning Christopher Nolan, even the ones that are joking, because that's who I chose. I want to talk to him about time, aging, perception, existence. Every single one of his movies, either structurally or topically, deals with time in a unique way. Memento plays backwards, and a man has a short-term memory. Insomnia, it's daylight all the time, and Al Pacino can't adjust, and his entire sleep schedule gets off. In Prestige, everything plays out of sequence to you. And we get to Dunkirk, Inception, I skipped over the biggest one that deals with time. And then Dunkirk has the time thing where 3 different stories are taking place in different. So I just feel like this is one of his obsessive mind topics that he dwells on constantly. Even Batman Begins plays out of sequence for the first half of the movie. And I think there's got to be a core Christopher Nolan DNA reason why he keeps going back to that.
Yeah.
And I want to find out. I want to poke holes and see. But I thought that was a really good question.
Yeah, I agree.
Over in the chat, go have a pint with Edgar Wright. Can't go wrong with that. Talk to James Gray about father-son relationships. Boy, howdy. That's going to be a heavy conversation. Talk with Wes Anderson about art, PTA, talk about music. Those are excellent answers. I want to talk to Tom Hanks about Star Trek. Okay. Is that Ian with the... No, that's Nick. He's here. I want to steal Jeremy's answer. Yeah, you do. Michael Bay, 16th century poetry. This is why the chat adds to the quality of this content, because they come up with awesome stuff like that.
I would love it if Michael Bay actually had a lot to say about 16th century poetry. Like, you throw it out there as some sort of joke, and he's like, no. Let me tell you about some of my favorite 1500s
I love when
poems.
Celebrities have some wealth of obsession or knowledge about something.
Yeah.
Like when I first learned Steve Martin was one of the best banjo players in the world, I was like, no, he's not. What the heck are you talking about? No, he really is.
He really is.
All right, everybody, that's going to do it for episode 76. Your homework is Adventureland, free on Pluto TV and YouTube. Thanks again to the chat for coming out and watching, listening live, and giving you their input along the way. Thank you, Aaron. And we'll see you guys next week. Have a good day.
See ya.